Mentally, I was gone. I knew that sooner or later my head was gonna go. I just didn't know when. I think it was 3 or 4 in the morning. Some cops found me in like the middle of a road, just like sleeping. I think when you're young, you don't consider these things that might be going on in your head. You kind of brush them aside. When I was playing football, it was more of a trying to escape from that it always seemed to show up. I think the mental health subject is something that's finally starting to get into the conversation, but it's very taboo. There's a lot of shame involved. Kids don't want to be asked, what's going on in their head, and their parents don't want to admit that they might have children that are vulnerable. It says a lot about the culture, how competitive sports are. I think it was the second year that Orlando City was doing their developmental academy, and I went to a trial. From the beginning, they started, just putting things into my brain. They're like, hey, you have a future here. Hey, you're very good at the sport. So that was when I joined them. I started dealing with some personal issues that I wouldn't mention to anyone, and that started to affect my game. I don't think it's realistic to tell a child that they can be a professional athlete. I don't see how that's healthy. So I'm at Orlando City, and I spoke with my father. I was like, I'm not having a good time. I don't want to be here. So I made the drastic decision of dropping out of high school because I thought that made sense at that time. And at that same time, I had a coach at Orlando City who had connections to a team at the under 20 level in the 3rd division of Columbia. Just off of that, off basically nothing, I went to Columbia. From the off, I could tell that it maybe wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. Where we trained was pretty much just a cow pasture. I mean, it was really sketchy. I'm at that team in Zerrate for maybe 2.5 months, maybe 3 months. And my uncle that I'm living with, he says that there's an open trial. So I ended up going to that on some weekend with no expectations. And not even 10 minutes into the trial, the coach that was assessing the players, he pulls me over and he's like, you want to play at this club? I'm sure. He's like, then you're going to play as a holding mid. Mentally, I'm definitely not in a good place. I'm not telling anybody about it. I think a lot of kids in America, they're used to just maybe an excess of positivity. Colombian culture is very, very unforgiving, and I wasn't expecting that going in. So I learned pretty fast that showing any type of weakness physically or mentally just wasn't a good thing. At that club, we had doctors and we had psychiatrists. So I remember one time I almost went and then I just backed out of it. I was like, I don't need this, I'm fine. I ended up spending almost 2 years at that club. The living conditions are very poor. So I thought it was best to just go back home. When I come back to the States, I felt like I was regressing somehow. In many ways, I felt like a failure because my goal when I moved to Colombia was to not come back. I wanted to be on a steady income, and I wanted to be able to call myself a professional. So I kept training very hard, but I didn't necessarily know why. I just felt like I had to. I ended up going to Mexico that December to Aguascalientes to a team called Necaxa. I ended up going there, playing with their reserves for about a month. I kind of knew in the back of my mind that I had been overtraining. Towards the end of that month, we were starting to have more and more physical tests, and they would ration our food. So at the end of that month, I get a chance in a friendly against Club Leon. I get 45 minutes at left back. I knew physically and mentally I was spent. So when I went into that game, I knew that I just had nothing left in my tank. And that was the wrong time to show that. So the club let go of me soon after that. That for me was rock bottom mentally. I was in an awful place. I remember coming back and just trying to put a face on. But I knew that sooner or later my head was gonna go. I just didn't know when. I stopped sleeping, I stopped eating. I felt like those closest to me, I couldn't trust in anymore. I left with no money, with nothing. I tried to leave home. And the following morning, some cops in Winter Springs found me in the middle of a road, just sleeping. Soon after that, I had to go to a psychiatric hospital. I was put on a number of antidepressants and a number of different things, and I had a lot of therapy. At that point, it was forced upon me that I needed help. I feel like I wouldn't have gotten it without having that happen to me, right? It almost felt like life had forced its hand, and that was the only way that I was finally gonna get the help that I needed. It took a lot of digging, soul searching, and just being incredibly honest with myself in order to get back to a point that felt healthy. So I actually didn't play soccer for over a year. I stepped away from the sport for almost a year and a half because it felt necessary to leave that for some time. I think nowadays I have what feels like the best relationship I've had with the sport. I would say to kids, and then also to the parents of those kids, you know, let them be children, let them enjoy themselves. You know, the results and whatnot carry very little weight. These days, I'm very thankful for my experiences with the sport. You know, I've had good ones, I've had awful ones, but, you know, they've helped shape me. I think they've helped me grow as a person. And if I could do it again, I wouldn't change anything about it. I'm Alejandro Guerrero-Zerrate, and soccer's been a major part of my life for as long as I can remember.